Okay, guys.
I did a video yesterday, I was just waffling around about, people talking baloney online and everything. And I kind of watched it later and I thought, well, probably had to take this down because we do have, Boy Scouts and stuff watching this channel, I gotta try to keep it a little bit more mellow. But it really does irritate me, the disrespect that goes around these days between martial arts, and everybody thinks that well, MMA is all that, as they say. But the fact of the matter is that when I was doing martial arts very actively amongst a lot of people when I was younger, uh, that whole situation there, you would encounter people that would, they would have a purple belt in Taekwondo, and then they would have a green belt and something else, and they would have, a yellow belt over here and this other system. They would be like, "Oh, I'm making my own thing," and making your own thing. You don't even have a grasp of each of those systems yet. You're trying to make your own thing. Yeah. You gotta at least become an expert in a martial art before you can go on to something else and maybe try to mix the two later or mix the three later or something like that. Some people, it's changed a little bit since then. Got more people that have become, multi-degree black belts in several different arts, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to mix it up and find your own personal way of doing things, fine. But when it comes to teaching martial arts, you should always teach martial arts purely, and then let the individual person make a decision as to whether they want to mix things up a bit or not. But the idea that mixed martial arts is like, it is really, you're just deluding yourself, because most of these guys, they train, their base is jiu-jitsu, the ground style jiu-jitsu. There is just stand-up jiu-jitsu, there's Chin Na in China, okay, which is the grappling art also. But the thing is that to watch mixed martial arts on television and to think that it is the end all be all is very delusional, right? Because yeah, I'm talking about martial arts today. I took down that video because it's a little bit too rough around the edges for the young people. But I am going to talk about martial arts a little bit in this video. Like in the style that I learned in the 70s, Wing Chun, right? Wing Chun is spelled several different ways. There's different lineages, and so forth. But the thing is that not everybody knows how to fight using it, okay? And the same goes for several other martial arts. But not, it's more prevalent in Wing Chun, because Wing Chun in the Orient, they don't allow fighting, okay? That could get you thrown in jail. So the whole challenge match thing in the 70s came and went, right? And now China has a very strict policy about fighting and whatnot, which is, it's a detriment. That's it's communism, right? That's the way communist work. The communist government works. They don't want anybody to be able to get good at fighting because they don't want anybody to topple communism, right? So, and the same thing goes with guns. Communists want to get rid of guns because they don't want anybody to topple communism. They don't want anybody to stand up to a dictatorship, right? So that's why they get rid of the guns. That's why they say, oh, no fighting, no fighting, not even competition fighting, which is not the same as real fighting, right? But, I could use Wing Chun on the ground. Absolutely. The thing is that you don't have to be standing upright to do a certain martial art, right? And to be honest with you, let's say we look at Japanese karate. Well, Japanese karate is more stand up, and there's no ground fighting, right? But the thing is that even though Wing Chun is a stand up system, right? You're standing up on your feet. If you go to the ground in Japanese karate and you go to the ground in Chinese Wing Chun Kung Fu, Wing Chun is more adaptable to the ground than the Japanese karate is. Now, if you have a background in martial arts, an extensive one, you will grasp what I'm talking about. Okay, but if you don't get it, fine, don't worry about it. Because then when you look at the Japanese martial arts, they got judo, they got jiu-jitsu, and then the grappling and throwing arts, aikido. I don't think too much of aikido personally. Incidentally, I heard that Steven Seagal had a Wing Chun man as his bodyguard. So, interesting. That's pretty interesting. So, I got like 7 minutes left here. We're going to talk a little bit about martial arts here, still. But then I'm going to go into, the next video is going to be on a wool hat. Okay, just a heads up. So, yeah. But the thing, what my whole thing about the video that I took down from yesterday, I left it up for a day, and then I thought about it. I thought, well, it's kind of rough around the edges for kids, Boy Scouts, so let's go ahead and take it down, and then we'll talk about the meat of the matter. That is being respectful towards other people when it comes to anything, really. But my choice of martial art, which has served me incredibly well over the past 50 years, okay, and I've done other martial arts too. I have dabbled in other martial arts, like I did a little bit of Okinawan karate when I was a kid, and I did just to check it out. I did Thai kickboxing, Muay Thai. I've done what else? Krav Maga. So in Krav Maga in the 80s, this is way before it became any kind of mainstream thing. I did some Krav Maga. Krav Maga really is the roots of Krav Maga are mostly in Wing Chun. So I mean, I could I could immediately see that. And the manual from the Israel Defense Forces that I was given a manual as Israel Defense Forces Krav Maga, and it was all in Hebrew. So I opened it up and I was like flipping through. There were the pictures in there, you know. I mean, any caveman could go by pictures, right? So I'm looking at it and I was like, man, this is rooted in Wing Chun. This came out of Wing Chun. So yeah, I don't I don't know what happened to the book, but you know, I got it in the 80s. So it was interesting. I think anything outside of Wing Chun these days, I would probably be mostly interested in Krav Maga because it's more me, you know. And see, that's the thing, guys, is that, you know, growing up, you know, back in the 70s, for instance, you know, we did martial arts, and a, a guy a guy could be like a Wing Chun man, or he could be a Okinawan Shorin Ryu or Shorei Khan or Ishin Ryu, or he could be a Kenpo man. But the thing was is that you know, that's what I mean. A lot of times, guys would go to a school back in those days, and you know they would check it out. You know, it's like buying a car. You know, what appeals to you. You know, this one what appeals to one guy will not necessarily appeal to another guy. Back then, you know, when it came to martial arts, you know, one school may have an instructor that aligns more with that guy than an instructor in another school. Okay, so that could have a, you know, sway their choice. But they all got along with, you know, I mean, obviously they would have, you know, some kind of competitions and so on, but they all got along. They would all, you know, they could all have coffee together and whatnot and not sit around and bash each other, you know. And that's the way it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be this, you know, MMA can defeat anything. Not necessarily. You know, I saw a comment online, and I do watch some martial arts videos here and there, you know, because I'm still involved in martial arts. I never gave that up. I still do martial arts. I don't do it, you know, 20 hours a day and sleep 4, you know, but I still do martial arts, you know. As a matter of fact, I had been planning on turning this room behind me into a small studio to practice in. You know, put the wooden dummy in there and whatnot. But you know, you only got so much of those greenbacks to go around. Anyway, get back to the subject here, which was the the way that people behave. Okay, I'm gonna have to wrap it up. But the way that so many people behave in the year 2025, right, compared to the 1970s, is ridiculous. You know, I mean, it's ridiculous. No respect. You know, people make fun of my martial art, Wing Chun. They call them chunners, and I've seen them called chunners and several other different things. You know, when you meet the end of my, you know, or my elbow or my knee or whatnot, then call me a chunner. You know, get what I'm saying here? I'm not going to get into a bunch of violent stuff, but You know, I handled myself over the years, and I never had any issues. Okay, I came up against skilled people. I talked about how I settled the matter with my brother, who was a boxer. About 15 seconds or less, he was down. Okay, but you know, it's just people that they've gone through the rigmarole of learning the movements, but they don't know the movements. They don't know what they're for. They don't know how to use them, and they don't know how to apply them in combat. That's the problem. You know, me, I know how to apply them in combat. Anyway, that's the end of this video, and mostly it's about mutual respect. You know, you see a lot of disrespect these days. You know, people talking trash, and most of the people that talk trash are probably people that don't know anything anyway. You know, but it's just not good. Here's my last word on